Well, good morning, guys. Today's a little bit quiet in the chat, not much going on there, so I guess I better talk out loud for the folks that come and watch this later. We're continuing on with our koala drawing today. I'm just going to be building up a little bit of the darker shadows along this side of the drawing. I'm using a 6B pencil again, and just using kind of circular motions and just building up layers. You don't want to put too much in. I don't want to make the paper really shiny and reflective, but I just want to get a little bit of dark in. This will help me to be able to see in the rest of the drawing where some of our darkest areas are going to look like. And we can start to marry those up. And it helps me to be able to see across the whole drawing what the tones will look like, what the values will look like in this drawing. So I hope you guys had a good Easter. It's Easter Monday here in Australia. We have one more day of holiday and then we're back to work. And some more shadowed areas here on the body of the koala. The fur on the bottom part of the face is quite light coloured, and I need to create a strong contrast by building up more shadow down here. This will help cut out the face of the koala and make it stand out and come forward a little bit, giving it more of a three-dimensional shape. So just here where the light meets the dark, that's where the strongest shadows are going to be. So I need to build that up to the darkest point, and then we'll get a little bit lighter as we go down the page. I'm using some directional shading in the same direction as the fur would be running, and I'm using some cross hatching as well, going across the fur to create darker tones. We're building up some of the darks, just starting to get where I want it. I'm leaving a little bit of the white poking through. I'm not making this a sharp, clean edge because the fur is overlaying. So we have the light fur at the top, which is then overlaying the darker fur at the bottom. And I'm not going to be easily able to pull those out with an eraser later or anything else. So I'm going to leave some jagged edges there, which will help us to be able to pull these through. Makes the appearance of the overlap a little bit. Then we can cut a few little lines in. It just strengthens that appearance of the overlap at the front. I want to get my darkest lines in this little area here. I'm using a medium amount of pressure here. I'm not pressing as hard as I can. I almost never press as hard as I can because that will damage the paper. But I'm pressing medium hard and I'm getting some strokes. And I'm just letting the pencil do the work. I'm not trying to draw each line neatly. I'm just letting it feel its way forward with some random marks, or at least they seem random, but overlaying the areas where I want it to be darker with more marks and putting less marks in some of these other areas. I want to build up some texture in this area with these lines. It will give us the appearance of some fur. Now I'm going against the grain that I was working in before, against the direction that I was working in before, with more lines, and we'll just keep adding these in because the fur actually moves in a few different layers and a few different lines here. So I'm just trying to recreate what I can see in the photo, building up the layers of tone to create the three-dimensional image. Of course, you can do anything you want. This is just how I'm going to do this particular drawing. And it's not the only way. This isn't the only technique that we can use, but it's an easy technique for a beginner, and so that's why I wanted to demonstrate it. Just lots of little marks. And to space them further and further apart, the further down the page I go, and that's allowing the tone to be lighter at the bottom. The closer we put the marks together, the darker the tone will be. Now I want to come back to the top of the drawing. There's quite a dark section just up here, and I want to add that in as well. So I'm going to go back to my circular motions and just get a very dark section right here. That will help build up this corner. As we build up the corner, then we'll go back to starting to make our short marks again to build in the texture. So tone and texture are the two things that we're using here. And we're using lines and shapes to create those tones and textures. So here in the darkest part, I'm going to build many, many little lines, create that texture. I'm not going to make it completely dark. It's not completely dark, and there's always some lighter section showing through, where a lighter piece of fur or hair is catching the light. We just have to keep building this up. It can be a laborious process, this type of shading, but ultimately it will give us a good effect. We'll get a three-dimensional object with some texture on it. There's lots of different textures. There's shiny textures, there's soft textures, there's even and smooth, there's uneven, and this one's an uneven texture. There's lots of little lines, lots of little things where one thing will cast a shadow on the thing next to it. One thing will be in the light and the next thing will be in the dark. I'm not going to draw every single hair or every single piece of fur on an animal, but what I can do is simulate the appearance by using these small lines, and we gradually build it up over time. So guys, I hope you had a good Easter. If you celebrate Easter, I hope you had a great celebration. I hope you got to catch up with some family. I hope you got to spend your time with the people you care about. I was quite fortunate I was able to spend some time with my family. That's why I've been offline for a few days, giving them my attention instead of you guys for a while. But now we're back. We'll get some posting going on again on Instagram and a few more streams going on this week. I'll just keep overlaying these areas. We just need to build them up a little bit darker and a little bit darker. We don't want to build any area up too dark at first or all at once. I want to do just a little bit at a time. Then over a while, we can see where we're at. We can see how well it's going. Some of the areas around these eyes and on the side of the face here are almost a pure white. I'm not going to leave them a pure white. I'm going to have a tiny bit of grey in there, but they're going to be very, very light. Some of the lightest parts of our drawing. Then down here we've got some quite dark areas. So I need to fill some of these in. I need to be careful here not to overdo it. It's not as dark as a lot of the areas at the top or around the edges, but we need to have some shading here to create this three-dimensional effect. So we just build it up little by little. It's important to take your time when you're doing a drawing. It's not a race. There's no need to rush it. You can just relax and enjoy the drawing. There's nowhere you need to get to in a hurry. All you need to do is just to relax and let the drawing come in its own time. Some drawings come together quickly and easily. Some drawings really are a fight to get from beginning to end. Sometimes you'll go through various changes. Sometimes where you start won't be where you finish. So you need to sometimes be a little bit flexible with your drawings. We need to be able to enjoy the process and not worry too much about the outcome at this stage. In every drawing, you'll reach a point where you feel like you're going through the motions, where you're just doing the same old thing or whatever, where you're just going through a grind, building up layers, and you feel like you're never going to get anywhere and it's not going to come together. And then all of a sudden, you look up and you realize that you're there. And that did come together. So if you're feeling any doubts about your work, you're not sure, it's normal and it's natural, and we all feel that way. So don't let it bother you. Now, just underneath the mouth, we've got a line of highlight and then some shadows. I need to get this in. There are a few hairs that will broach the darker areas. I'm going to struggle to put these in just now. I'm going to try and come back with an eraser later and cut a couple in. I'm just going to work very lightly here. We don't have to get too dark. Just using lines and shading. This little part here is actually one of the darkest parts of the drawing, but I've got to make sure that we don't go too far with it. It all has to balance, and that's the thing. That's where it's going to get. It's just keeping that balance. If we make one section too dark too soon, we can lose that balance, and then it can be very hard to get it back. Once you make a section very dark, with the graphite, often we can't pull it back completely, particularly if we've gone so dark we've damaged the paper. Now I want to work on this nose a little bit and build up some more layers. Again, some of these areas are some of the darkest areas on the drawing, so I need to put those in. Just underneath the bottom of the nose here, there's some sections where there's quite strong shadows. I'm going to just draw those in. Wherever I can see a really dark shape, I'm looking at the shape itself, and then I'm just drawing that in. I'm trying to use my eye just to judge how dark is it really against the surrounding areas. And then I'm looking at my drawing and I'm looking at what are some of the darks that I've put in. We need to make it all marry up. Now the whole surface of this nose is a little bit darker than the rest of the koala's face, and we'll all get a bit of shading. There's not really any pure white highlights on this. There's no real wet areas. Wet areas is normally where they reflect the light the most. That's where the eyes come into it. With another type of animal, you might have a wet nose and it will reflect more light. But this animal has a very dry nose, and so we're not going to get a lot of light reflecting off it. There's still some light will reflect. That's where we need to be a little bit careful about how we do this shading, so that we don't make it too dark, we don't leave it too light. Good old Goldilocks knew what was going on. Everything has to be just right. I'm going to do pencil drawings. I think I may need to get a light box in here. This is getting a little bit shiny already. I hope that the video is okay. I'll watch it back later and see what it looks like. But this light might be a little bit too aggressive for this type of drawing to show it up really well. Wonder if All right, we'll fiddle with that later. But now let's do the drawing. Back to our fur. That doesn't mean we've finished the nose. There will be more in the nose, but right now we need to build up some more of this fur. The different parts of the fur all travel in different directions across the face, and that's the truth with most animals. And with people, if you're drawing people with beards and facial hair, everything is always changing its direction. So we need to just be a little bit aware of that. Usually there'll be clumps. If you look for the clumps, that can sometimes make it easier. It's not so easy with this one because the hair is really short. So even the clumps are quite tiny. We can simulate that by making a few little lines here and there and just working through it. Little areas that are slightly darker than the rest, which then have some lighter areas overlapping. There's quite a dark section here. I just want to get that in. We just need to overlay some more darks here. And that helps bring the shape of the koala's head out a little bit as well. Koala has a really round face. Just want to capture that a little bit. Now, because this is just a sketchbook, the paper quality won't allow me to put in too many more layers over here where I'm working now on the dark side. Oh no, we've gone to the dark side. Now, I can't put too many more layers in, so I have to just accept that some of these darks are getting as dark as they're going to be. What that will mean for the total drawing is we won't be able to build up as much contrast as there is in the reference because of the medium that we've chosen. We can add some more contrast to some areas by coming back in with some charcoal. But I don't know if I'm necessarily going to do that for this demonstration. We'll see how we feel as we get towards the end of the drawing. But for now, I'll just keep building up the layers. Now, I don't take a great deal of care with this because I like to leave some lines in my drawing. Good morning. How are you today? Good to see you there. Chat's been very quiet so far this morning. Happy Easter if you celebrate Easter. If not, well, I hope you're having a great weekend. Keep building up the layers with the pencil. As we push the background further back in some of these peripheral areas, then we'll get more 3D rendering in our shape. The face will really come forward, and the face is the focal point of our drawing. The focal point, of course, being just simply the thing that you look at, or the thing that your eye is drawn towards. So how are you going, Nick Arciano? Probably said your name all wrong. I apologise for that. But how are you going today? What exciting things are you working on at the moment? I'm going to get a little bit more energetic in how I apply my lines now. Put a lot of shading in. We've started to blend everything together a little bit in our shading. And I want to create some texture here. I want to create some energy with these lines. And putting the lines in all directions will help us to create that energy and to build everything up in this way. So I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive now in how I apply the lines, because I want to keep that energy and that texture in this drawing. I don't want a smooth surface on my koala. I want him to have a lively and an energetic fur coat. Section here is a little bit too light. I need it to stay lighter than the rest of the surrounding areas, but I don't want it to be quite so light. I keep changing my direction a little bit. And I'm not afraid to add in a few little scribbles here and there, because again, that will give my drawing more energy and more texture. Build some more shading, make it a little bit darker. Now the sections around the lines of the eyes. I need to get some real darks in here. We need to make these eyes sit back a little bit. So I'm just going to use small circular motions here and just keep applying a medium pressure. I never press really hard. Just medium pressure. Let that build up. It's gradually getting darker and darker. We just have to be patient. Good morning, Sue. Welcome to the live stream. It's great to see you today. I hope you're having a great weekend. Happy Easter and all those sorts of things. What's the weather like in Canada today? Thank you very much for your kind compliments. I appreciate it. But you're not such a bad artist yourself. I've seen some of your videos and I see some of your work. I'm starting to look for some of the details in this drawing. We'll start to build up some of these little sections. There's lots of little overlapping lines I'm not going to stress too much about, because after all, this is just a beginner's drawing. So I'm just going to look for a few of these little sections. And we'll just draw in a couple of little details. And I'm just trying to keep my hand out of the way here so you can actually see what I'm doing. I need a piece of paper. I'm going to have to rest my hand on the drawing for a bit. So I usually just grab any kind of piece of paper I can find. April Art Challenges. Tell me about your April Art Challenges, Sue. I haven't had time to watch any videos lately, so I'm not sure what's going on with most folks. I'll just hit the camera with my head. That's not a wise idea. Now that I've got the piece of paper here, I can get a little bit more hand control going on. and we can draw in some of these lines. Now the corner of this eye is nice and rounded. It's not pointy like I've got it at the moment, so I need to make it a little bit more rounded. So I'm going to put a little bit more dark in around the top of the eye. This is one of the darkest areas of the drawing, and I want to get it very nice and dark. Now the eye itself has some quite dark sections here, and again I want to build those up. The eye should have the strongest contrast of the whole drawing in it. That's the thing that we want people to look at. Let's just start to build that up. Now I need to leave some highlights, and it's easier if I leave the highlights than it will be to actually erase them all at the end. So that's what I'm going to do here. Every Friday you have an abstract theme where you have to explain how your art embodies the theme. The themes are faith, love, strength, and courage. Well, that sounds like a very interesting challenge, Sue. I'll have a look at it. Have you got a video up on your channel about those things now? And by the way, guys, if you want to link your channels in the chat, you're welcome to do so. Now back to my little lines here. I've added some darks to the eye, but I'm moving on back to this surrounding area. I really do like to build the whole thing up all at once. If I get bogged down in one little section, I always end up either overworking that section, or we end up with something that we can't match or marry up the rest of the drawing with. Your last video. Well, that's great. I'll check out your video, Sue. And guys who watch this later, check out Sue's video and join in the challenge. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to build up this darker section through here. Got all of these little marks and little lines. We'll all just build, and over time it's giving us more texture, but we're using at the same time just the closeness or how far apart the lines are to create the three-dimensional tonality or the values if you're from the US. And happy Easter to you too, Sue. Absolutely. Happy Easter to everyone. I hope everyone has had a safe and happy holiday, and I hope you've had a chance to spend it with the people that you care about. And maybe you found some chocolate eggs if you're really lucky. I'm adding in a little bit of cross-hatching here and there just to add some darker sections. We need to just keep simulating these little clumps. It's really time-consuming drawing fur or hair. No matter which technique you use, it's always going to take a lot of time. We just have to be patient and to let the drawing build up. Move that away for a minute. Now I'll work on this other eye a little bit. You've got, whenever I need to leave a section for highlights, I'll actually use that. Whenever I need a section for highlights, I usually will draw the shape of it in. In this case, I've kind of drawn a shape through here. That gives me something that I can look at and recognize as a no-go zone. I know that I shouldn't go beyond that point. Otherwise, I'm getting into the highlight area. Now, this further away eye isn't quite as detailed in the reference photo that I have, but I'm going to add a little bit more detail to it because I've actually changed it. I've turned the eye towards myself more so that the koala will be looking at the viewer rather than staring off into the middle distance, which it actually is in the reference photo. Now I've just got to tie it in with the surrounding areas and get this little bit of shape going. So we'll use a bit of shading, a little bit more lines. There's a lot of really light areas around these eyes. I don't want them to be completely light, so I'm just going to very lightly shade them. We don't want them to be completely white or they will stand out too much. We need to just give them a tiny little bit of shadow because the only pure white I'm going to have in this drawing is going to be in the reflections in the eyes. Everything else will be slightly knocked down. There's different ways you can do this. I'm just using the pencil really, really lightly here to put a very fine layer over the top. Knock back the whites of the eyes a little bit. Just keep knocking all these areas back with some very light shading. Get it out of the way. So one of the other ways that you could do this would be to grab a tissue and to blend it very slightly, and then to rub your tissue with a small amount of the graphite still on it over the areas that you want to make a little bit lighter. In fact, you can build your whole drawing up that way if you want to. Now, what I want to do next is start building this area up some more. We've got lots of little hairs in this area. We start making some of these little marks. So the drawing's coming together. We're getting there little by little. If there's something you guys want to see me draw, leave me a comment, let me know. I'll have a go at most things. Now this lighter section has some longer hairs in it. So I'm going to make longer lines. Where the shorter hairs are, we use more shorter lines. Now I'm just looking at some of the patterns that I can see in my reference photo. I start to build in the darks. And that helps to create the appearance of these little clumps. Some sections are a little bit lighter than others. And towards the edge, it definitely gets a little bit darker. So I want to put that in with some light shading. Most of the time, you can see that I'm using the pencil by holding the end. That allows me to get really light with my touch. If I hold the pencil like this, it's almost impossible for me to get a really light touch. Whereas if I hold it further back, that gives me a lot more ability to adjust the firmness. Just add a little bit more very light shading. I'm just adding this shading in the direction that the hairs will go in, and that's going to help us build up those layers of fur. If you find it easier, of course, you can turn your drawing around. No reason not to. Add a little bit more shading down here. I want to push this area back. It's too far forwards for me. I want to make it go backwards. So I'm just shading in every direction here, just building different layers. Just scribbling and hatching and cross-hatching. I'm not using any finesse whatsoever. I'm just putting in some darker areas. That's all I want to do. It doesn't have to be smooth or detailed or anything else. Just putting down blocks of tone. Then we can come back in with some hairs again. Lots of little lines again. Again, just let the pencil find its own way. You don't have to draw everything in a detailed or accurate way. You can if you want to, and if that's what makes you happy, by all means, go for it. But you can just let the pencil find its way, and you'll get some really expressive marks. Now I'm going to sharpen my pencil. I still want this area here to get a lot darker, so I'm going to start to build in some hairs. So we start to draw these in, again, where we've got these sections overlapping of light over dark. We want to leave a little bit of simulation of that occurring. And then we can just space them out to make it a little bit lighter down the bottom and draw them in a little bit heavier at the top. A little bit longer and closer together. And that will make it all darker. I can add a little bit more dark to the background. Still got enough room left for a little bit more layering. Paper's getting full. Now what I could do is I could get a darker pencil. I go up to an 8B in the pencils I have with me, but I don't want to use all the pencils. I want to keep it simple. So I'm just going to add a little bit more layering. And then to help keep it nice and sharp, we can come back with an eraser. And just pull out a few little highlights here and there. Again, we don't need to draw in every little line of hair or every section. Just want to add a couple of these. It will bring this back out. Oops, there's the middle. Now, just around the eyes, I can pick up a few tiny little bits here and there. Just where we've overlaid a little bit too much, we can take a little bit back out. It just tidies up some of these little sections. That will help us to get... Ooh, sorry guys. Connected to too many things. pick up some of those areas where we just want to be able to pull some really light areas out. Again, we're going to come back and blend over this again, but this would just allow me to keep some of the really light highlights. Okay. Back to our pencil. Now, add some more dark lines where the darkest areas are. Just keep on building darks. So there's different ways you can do your drawings. You can do them from light to dark, or you can do them from dark to light. So in this case, we're going from light to dark. We keep adding areas of darkness and make the drawing darker and darker as we go, building up to the darkest points. The other thing you can do, which I sometimes do in my charcoal drawings, is to put the darkest sections in first and then pull the lights back out of it again, which is a very similar technique to what I just did with my eraser in pulling back some of those areas. Just keep building up the lines. It's slow and it's tedious, but it will give us the effect that we want in the end. I'm looking for little areas, as I said, to create the appearance of the tufts sticking out. Start to draw those in a bit. Just where there's an uneven texture or an uneven section of light and dark. We just look for those and draw them in as best we can. Below some of these little areas here where we transition from the lighter sections to the darker sections. More lines in the darker sections, fewer lines in the lighter sections. Now I want to get a really dark line through here. It's quite a dark edge. Build it up. Right around the edge of this nose, there's some really dark sections. I just want to build those in. So I start to hold the pencil closer to the tip for the darker sections, so I can push a little bit harder and draw with a little bit of control. I don't want to put random dark lines in places where I don't want them. Let's put them all here in this section where they belong. So the closer we hold the pencil to the end where we're drawing, the more control we have. The further away we hold it, the less we have control over the tip itself, but the lighter we can work. How do you like to hold your pencil? It can be a unique thing, and everybody's a little bit different, even in how you write or do other things. Everybody likes to hold it a little bit differently. And there's no right or wrong way, in my opinion. So the very edge of this nose has a dark section here. Just want to draw it in a little bit darker. Build up the darks a little bit more across the whole drawing, or the whole nose, is what I meant to say. Just look for the sections that are a little bit darker or a little bit lighter and just try to draw those in. Look for the shapes of them. Everything will have a start and a finish. Sometimes it's very sharply defined, and that's where you'll draw a sharp edge with a dark line or have a contrast from dark to light. Sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes it's very soft and faint, the edge. And so you'll build that in very softly. And this is what we call a soft edge. Basically, it's where you just have a very slight variation in the tone from one section to another. Some of these will be really subtle, and you might have trouble seeing them and drawing them when you're a beginner. But over time, if you keep looking for them, they'll get easier and easier. Now, I want to leave a few lines in here. There are a few wrinkles on the nose of this koala. So I just want to simulate those just by drawing in a few lines, a few darker lines here and there. Happy Easter, Art in Art. How are you today? I hope you haven't been there long. I haven't been looking at the chat much. It's been a bit quiet this morning. But welcome to the tutorial. I'm really glad you came for a visit, and I hope you're having a great Easter. So we're doing some of the darker sections around the koala's nose now. Still needs to get darker and darker, but I can need to keep in mind the rest of the drawing. As in, we don't want to get so dark that we can't make sense of everything else. Lots of little lines in here. I'm just going to put a few little marks in there. So it's taking shape now. We're starting to get a few sections standing up like they should. He's got a little bump on his nose here. I'll just draw that in. Every little mark is another thing that you can measure off just to check that you've got everything in the right place. It's a way of helping you to evaluate the shapes if you're not very used to drawing by eye and looking for shapes. It's a good way to help you start to build up that skill. Just look for where is the difference. This little bump, is it in the middle? Is it evenly spaced between all the different sections? Is it to one side? And how does the shading interact with it? Do we have the dark shadows coming right up to it? Is it in a lighter section? I ask myself these questions all the time as I'm doing a drawing. These are all the little things that I'm looking for. So the nose is starting to take a bit shape. I want to put a little bit more dark in down here. I need to get some definition on this. So the bottom of the nose and the mouth are a little bit lost at the moment in the drawing. I have neglected them. So now we'll pay some attention to them for a while and start to build them up. Some really fine little lines and things in here. I'm just going to ignore them for the purposes of this drawing demonstration. There's not a whole lot to be gained by putting them in. So we're just going to build this up more or less in colour blocks. We'll have a few lines in there for the hairs, but I'm not going to draw in every single one. It would take me all day. I haven't got all day, neither of you. You've got your own drawing to go to. Certainly hope you will be drawing today or tonight or whatever time of day it may be for you. So we just look for more areas of shading here. Whatever is left outstanding, there's a few little dots where hairs attach. I'm going to just simulate them very roughly. Using the sharper tip of the point, I'm going to draw in some of these hairs. We can use the nice sharp tip for any really sharp lines that we want to draw. Then I just use the side of the pencil for everything else. Back to building up the texture of the fur again. Just want to put a little bit of definition here around the eyes, just where I can see it's getting a little bit lost. Then back to our lines again. And I built those sections up. This section looks like it's too light again, so we come back into it and get some more lines going here. Every time you change one part of the drawing, it can change the rest of the drawing, and that's normal. It's natural, and that's why I work on the whole drawing at once instead of just one section at a time, because every time it changes, you have to be able to change with it. Put a little bit more depth into this eye. Now that we put the darker sections in the nose, we can put some darker sections in the eye. Now there's some little shapes in the reflection in the eye that I'm just going to draw in briefly here. I'm not going to agonize exactly over them. Just going to put them in a little bit. Each of these little details just adds a little bit more depth and visual interest into your drawing. So you don't have to draw every little thing. You can pick which ones are important to you and then just focus on those. You don't have to draw it exactly how it is. You can make it up. But it's a good idea to practice drawing how you see it or what's really there. so that you can when you want to. Now, there's a little bit more shadow at the top of the eye, so I want to draw that in. The eyes always have some reflected light, and light bounces around in different ways, but we want to keep it pretty simple. Let's draw a little bit of a darker section there, a little bit of a darker section here. I'm just using cross-hatching for a lot of these. Drawing a little bit of darker sections here. A few more little lines around here will help us build up the appearance of the fur, even though some of this fur is very pale coloured. There's still always some lines in it. Build this section up here and this bit here. I'm just looking for little areas where there's something that's slightly darker than the area around it, or an area where there's a little bit more light. And I'm just trying to work those areas out and mark them in lines. You can make it smooth if you want to make it smooth. If we were drawing a human being, I would make it smoother. I wouldn't use so many little lines. But good morning, Clouded Minds. How are you this morning? Glad to see you here, my friend. Happy Easter to you as well. Take that away. We'll bring it over here and we'll work on this now. So we just want to build this up a little bit more. I don't want to go crazy with it. I want to leave it a little bit vague, but I'll add a little bit of detail just to make it sit down properly. We put in a few little marks here. Oh, thank you very much, Clouded Minds. You're very kind to hit the like button. I have hardly had time to watch any videos at all lately. I'll have to come and see what you've been up to lately. No doubt you have a few animations up that I haven't been able to see lately. Those are the ones that I enjoy the best. I'm going to press fairly lightly, still just drawing in lots of little lines here. There'll be some cross-hatching, some overlay. Some of it I'm drawing in the direction that the lines go in. Some of it I'm drawing against the grain to create additional darkness, just like that. So what exciting projects are you working on at the moment, Clouded Minds? Get rid of that so I can see what I'm doing. Now I want to put a little bit more definition around the edge of this face, just to make it stand out a little bit more. A little bit more definition into the eye. make this part here a little bit darker. I'm going to shade up to the edge of the face and leave a bit of an uneven line, and that will help to simulate the white fur overlapping the darker areas. We'll make this all a little bit darker. Just rough shading here. That's all I need. As a general rule of thumb in my drawings, I will shade more neatly the closer I am to the important parts of the drawing, and more roughly the further I get away from that. A little bit more definition here. A little bit more shadow here, just to bring that out a little bit. Shading a little bit darker. We're getting almost as dark as we can go with this pencil here. This is pretty much the limits of our darkness. So that's the limit of the darkness in our drawing. We've got to make that balance. I'm just going to put a little bit more shading over the top of this section. So the darkest areas are to the left, the lighter areas are to the right. To the right, I can speak. Gradually, as we work our way across, we want that to be simulated. I need a few more little lines in here just to tie it together. That's going to give us a little bit more connection between the different sections. Between the lights and the darks, we want to keep the same textural qualities. Even though there are some light areas and some darker areas, we still want some light little lines in here to tie it together. Otherwise, it will look like it's two different textures, and that's not what we want to achieve. So we can just use some light little lines and space them further apart. Then come back to building up the darker sections through here. Just remembering the direction that the fur runs in. Just a few little lines, and these light sections are longer, so we make those lines a little bit longer. On the right, we're going to make it a little bit more faint and a little bit more vague. A little bit more shadow through this section. And I definitely encourage you, if you're a beginner drawing, don't be afraid to stop and take breaks. Don't be afraid to leave your work for a few minutes, then come back and look at it with fresh eyes. That's always a really good idea. I'm not going to do that today, but it can help you see the problems, to see what to do next. If you're not sure what to do next, it's a clear indication that you need a little break. So go and do something else for a minute and then come back. I'm going to add a little bit more shadow over here. little bit more shadow in here. Keep building it up. There we go. Now he's coming along pretty nicely. Now I need to work on this side a little bit. We just need a bit of definition here. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. I do need to come into the side of this nose a little bit better. When I say I need to come into the side of this nose a little bit better, what I actually mean is I need to create more contrast here to sharpen up this edge so that the nose stands proud of the face. At the moment, they're blurring in together, blending in together. We don't want that. The nose has to stand out. So we'll pull it out, put some darks in next to the lights, and that will give us the contrast that we need. There we go. Still not quite there. So this is an example of a sharp edge where we have the side of the nose contrasting both in tone and in texture with what's going on beside it. So we want to make them very different. Just looking for lines and drawing those sections in. Little by little, it's all coming together. We go away, piece of paper, and we're back to our lines. Just keep shading, building up. Must be morning. I can hear the birds outside starting to wake up. That's good. Hopefully I'm awake as well. Build this up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Make this a little bit darker. So what do you guys think? Seen me build it up, section by section, layer by layer. There's more that could be done, but I don't think there's more that needs to be done. Let's knock this back a little bit. We more or less have the basics all in there. We have a three-dimensional animal with texture in the shape of fur and a harder nose and a little bit of liquid in the eyes. We've got a few different areas. We build it up section by section. You've seen how I do it. I encourage you to go and try it for yourself. And just keep looking for little areas where it's not quite right. And just build those in. Make this a little bit sharper. It's still a little bit vague. Now it's starting to come together. There we go. You can fiddle with it and agonize it for a long time. I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you very much. As always, I've enjoyed your company. Good morning, Yeth. How are you today? Glad to see you. Unfortunately, I'm stopping now, but I hope you like the drawing. Guys, I've really enjoyed your company today. I hope there's some useful tips and hints in this two-part tutorial for you. I will do another stream later this week. We'll see which day. As always, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and bye-bye.